The world held its breath as two of Britain's most beloved royals faced their darkest hour. Behind palace walls, away from the glittering tiaras and ceremonial grandeur, a father and daughter-in-law fought battles that no crown could shield them from. Cancer doesn't recognize royal bloodlines, and in 2024, it knocked on the doors of Buckingham Palace with devastating force. But this isn't a story of defeat. This is the extraordinary tale of how King Charles III and Catherine, Princess of Wales, turned their greatest vulnerability into their most powerful strength. From secret hospital corridors to carefully orchestrated public appearances, from whispered prayers in private chapels to thunderous applause from grateful nations, this is the inside story of how two royals rewrote the rules of courage, forever changing how the world sees both cancer and the crown. What happened behind closed doors during those frightening months? How did they support each other through the unthinkable? And what did their triumphant return really mean for the future of the monarchy? The answers will surprise you, inspire you, and remind you that sometimes the most ordinary human experiences create the most extraordinary leaders. The January morning started like any other at Windsor Castle. King Charles III sat in his private study reviewing state papers while the early winter sun filtered through ancient windows. At 42, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was preparing for what should have been another busy day of royal engagements. Neither could have imagined that within weeks their lives would be forever changed by two words that strike fear into every heart. It's cancer. For King Charles, the first signs were subtle. A routine medical check following his prostate surgery revealed something doctors hadn't expected. The 75-year-old monarch, who had waited decades to wear the crown, suddenly found himself facing an enemy more formidable than any political crisis or constitutional challenge he had ever encountered. The diagnosis came quietly, delivered in a sterile hospital room where royal protocol meant nothing and human vulnerability meant everything.
Your Majesty, the oncologist said gently, we need to discuss treatment options. In that moment, Charles wasn't a king. He was simply a man confronting his mortality. The weight of the crown seemed insignificant compared to the weight of those words.
He thought of his beloved Queen Camilla, of his sons William and Harry, of a nation that had only recently accepted him as their sovereign after the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Meanwhile, Catherine's world was quietly crumbling in a different way. The mother of three had been feeling unwell for weeks, attributing her symptoms to the exhaustion that comes with royal duties and raising young children. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis needed their mother, and Catherine had always prided herself on being present for them despite the demands of royal life. The abdominal surgery in January was supposed to be routine. Catherine entered the London clinic with confidence, expecting a quick recovery that would allow her to return to her packed schedule of engagements. Prince William held her hand as she was wheeled into surgery, both of them believing this was just a temporary setback in their carefully orchestrated royal life. But recovery didn't come as expected. Days turned into weeks, and Catherine found herself confined to a hospital bed longer than anyone had anticipated. The usually vibrant princess, known for her radiant smile and boundless energy, felt her strength slipping away. Something wasn't right, and the growing concern in the eyes of her medical team confirmed her worst fears. The pathology results arrived on a grey February afternoon. William was by her side when the doctor delivered the news that would change everything. Cancer had been found during the surgery. The woman who had gracefully stepped into one of the world's most scrutinized roles, who had modernized the monarchy with her warmth and authenticity, now faced a battle that would test every ounce of her strength. "How do we tell the children?" Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible. The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. George, at 10, was old enough to understand the gravity of serious illness. Charlotte and Louis, younger and more innocent, would need their own gentle explanations. The thought of seeing fear in their eyes was almost unbearable. William, usually so composed and duty-bound, felt his world shifting beneath his feet. His wife, his anchor, his partner in everything, was facing the fight of her life. The future king found himself grappling with a helplessness he had never experienced. All his royal training, all his preparation for leadership, had never prepared him for this moment. As news of both diagnoses began to circulate within the tight inner circle of the royal family, a strange sense of solidarity emerged. King Charles and Catherine, who had grown closer over the years as she embraced her royal role, now found themselves walking parallel paths of uncertainty and courage. They were no longer just family members bound by duty and protocol. They were fellow warriors in an unexpected battle. The decision to keep both diagnoses private initially was carefully considered. The royal family understood the intense public interest in their health, but they also recognized the need for space to process, plan, and begin treatment without the crushing weight of global attention. Palace staff worked quietly to rearrange schedules, cancel engagements, and create a protective bubble around both patients. But secrecy in the age of social media and relentless tabloid coverage was nearly impossible. Whispers began to circulate. Catherine's extended absence from public events sparked rumors and speculation. The usually reliable royal correspondents found themselves grasping for information that was being carefully guarded behind palace walls. King Charles made the difficult decision to share his diagnosis first, understanding that as the monarch, his health was a matter of constitutional significance. The announcement in February sent shockwaves through the Commonwealth and beyond. Here was a king who had waited his entire life to serve, now facing the possibility that his reign might be cut short before it had truly begun. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support poured in from world leaders, celebrities, and ordinary citizens whose lives had been touched by cancer. Charles found himself deeply moved by the outpouring of love and concern. It was a reminder that beneath all the pageantry and protocol, the monarchy's greatest strength lay in its human connection to the people. For Catherine, watching Charles's announcement from her hospital room, the courage he displayed was both inspiring and daunting. She knew her own announcement would need to come soon, but the thought of making her private struggle public felt overwhelming. As a mother, she wanted to protect her children from the inevitable media storm. As a princess, she understood her responsibility to be transparent with the people who looked up to her. The weeks following Charles's announcement were a masterclass in quiet dignity. The king began his treatment while continuing to fulfill essential constitutional duties from behind palace walls. He signed important documents, met with key officials, and maintained his connection to the Commonwealth, but always with the shadow of cancer treatment looming over each interaction. Catherine's journey was more complex. As she prepared for her own treatment protocol, she struggled with the balance between motherhood and royal duty. The woman who had once effortlessly juggled charity patronages, state dinners, and school runs now found herself questioning everything about her future. Would she be strong enough to continue her royal work? Would her children remember this time as one of fear? Or would they somehow find strength in watching their mother fight? The support systems that emerged during these dark weeks revealed the true character of the royal family. Queen Camilla stepped up magnificently, taking on additional duties while also serving as Charles's primary emotional support. Prince William transformed from dutiful son and heir into a fierce protector of his immediate family, making decisions about public engagements based solely on what was best for Catherine and their children. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duties, quietly increased her own workload to compensate for her brother's reduced schedule. The Princess Royal's unwavering dedication during this period reminded everyone why she's consistently ranked as the hardest working member of the royal family. Her practical support allowed Charles to focus on his treatment without worrying about the crown's obligations being neglected. Behind the scenes, the most touching moments were often the simplest ones. Charles and Catherine began having regular phone calls, sharing their fears, their hopes, and their determination to beat cancer. These conversations, away from the ears of advisors and courtiers, created a bond between them that went far beyond royal protocol. They were two people facing the same enemy, drawing strength from each other's courage. The decision about when and how Catherine would announce her diagnosis became a family priority. Every option was carefully considered. From a formal palace statement to a personal video message, the goal was to control the narrative while maintaining Catherine's dignity and protecting her children from unnecessary trauma. As March approached, the pressure mounted. Catherine's absence from public life had reached a point where speculation was becoming harmful, not just to the royal family's reputation, but to Catherine herself. Wild theories and conspiracy stories were circulating online, creating a toxic environment that threatened to overshadow the reality of her courageous battle. The solution, when it came, was characteristically Catherine. She chose to speak directly to the public, in her own words, sharing her truth with the same grace and authenticity that had defined her royal journey. The decision to film a personal message was both brave and strategic. It allowed her to address the speculation while maintaining control over her story. The evening before the announcement, Catherine sat with William and their children, explaining that tomorrow the world would know about her illness. The conversation was heart-wrenching, but necessary. George, with the wisdom of a child who was already learning about duty and responsibility, simply hugged his mother and said, "You're brave, Mama." Charlotte and Louis, sensing the gravity of the moment even if they couldn't fully understand it, wrapped their arms around their parents in a family embrace that spoke louder than any words. That night, as Catherine prepared for sleep before one of the most important days of her life, she received a text message from King Charles. It was simple but profound. "Tomorrow, you show them what courage looks like. I'm proud of you." In that moment, she realized that their shared battle had created something beautiful. A partnership in courage that would define both their reigns and their legacy. Catherine's announcement video, released on a quiet Friday evening in March, changed everything. Filmed in the gardens of Windsor Castle with spring flowers blooming around her, she spoke directly to the camera with a strength that belied the fear in her eyes.
"It has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family," she said, her voice steady but vulnerable.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London, and at the time, it was thought that my condition was non-cancerous. The surgery was successful, however. Tests after the operation found cancer had been present. The world stopped. Social media fell silent for precious moments before exploding with messages of support, love, and admiration. The speculation that had plagued her during her absence was instantly replaced with shame and respect. Here was a woman, a mother, a princess, showing the world what real courage looked like. For Catherine, the hours after the announcement felt like a strange mixture of relief and terror. The secret that had consumed her family for weeks was finally public, but now came the reality of living her cancer journey under the most intense spotlight imaginable. Every treatment session, every doctor's appointment, every moment of weakness would be scrutinized by a global audience hungry for updates. King Charles watched his daughter-in-law's announcement from his own treatment center, where he was receiving chemotherapy. The sight of Catherine speaking so bravely about her diagnosis filled him with an overwhelming sense of pride and kinship. They were no longer just family members supporting each other through individual health crises. They had become symbols of hope for millions of people facing their own cancer battles. The treatment protocols for both royals were designed with their unique circumstances in mind. Charles's medical team worked around his constitutional duties, scheduling sessions that would allow him to continue essential work while fighting his disease. The image of the king reviewing state papers between chemotherapy sessions became a powerful symbol of dedication and determination. Catherine's treatment was complicated by her role as a mother to 3 young children. Her medical team, led by some of Britain's most respected oncologists, created a schedule that would minimize disruption to George, Charlotte, and Louis's routines while maximizing her chances of recovery. The princess insisted on being present for bedtime stories, homework help, and family dinners whenever her treatment schedule allowed. The ripple effects of both announcements extended far beyond the royal family. Cancer charities across the Commonwealth reported unprecedented increases in donations and volunteer applications. The Catherine effect, which had previously boosted fashion sales and charity awareness, now became a force for medical advocacy and cancer research funding. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had worked with cancer patients for over 2 decades, later reflected on the unique impact of having 2 senior royals publicly battling the disease simultaneously. What Charles and Catherine did was remove the shame and secrecy that often surrounds cancer diagnosis, she explained. They showed that cancer doesn't discriminate, that courage comes in many forms, and that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. The relationship between Charles and Catherine deepened significantly during their treatment months. Their shared experience created conversations that went far beyond the usual royal protocol. During one particularly difficult week in April, when both were struggling with the side effects of their respective treatments, Charles called Catherine with an unusual request. "I'd like us to visit the cancer ward together," he said. "When we're both feeling strong enough, I think there are people who need to see that we're fighting alongside them." Catherine was initially hesitant, worried about the media attention such a visit would generate, but Charles's reasoning was compelling. Their visibility could bring hope to patients who felt isolated and forgotten in their own battles. The planning for this joint hospital visit became a family mission. William worked closely with palace communications teams to ensure the visit would focus on the patients rather than the media spectacle. Queen Camilla coordinated with hospital administrators to identify patients who would benefit most from the royal attention. Even the younger royals contributed. George, Charlotte, and Louis created get-well cards that Catherine could distribute during the visit. Meanwhile, the daily realities of treatment continued to challenge both royals in unexpected ways. King Charles discovered that the fatigue from chemotherapy was unlike anything he had experienced in his 75 years. The man who had maintained an incredibly active schedule throughout his adult life suddenly needed afternoon naps and had to decline evening engagements. The hardest part, Charles confided to a close friend, isn't the physical discomfort. It's the feeling that I'm letting people down, that I'm not fulfilling my duty as king. This struggle with perceived inadequacy was something many cancer patients could relate to. The guilt that comes with needing to prioritize health over other obligations. Catherine faced different but equally challenging adjustments. The woman who had prided herself on her hands-on parenting style had to accept help in ways that felt foreign to her. Nannies took over school runs she would normally handle herself. William stepped up to manage evening routines when Catherine was too exhausted from treatment to read bedtime stories. The children's responses to their mother's illness revealed their individual personalities in touching ways. George, already aware of his future role as king, appointed himself as Catherine's protector, bringing her tea when she was resting and checking on her throughout the day. Charlotte channeled her energy into creating artwork and poems that would cheer up Mama when she's feeling poorly. Louis, the youngest, seemed to understand instinctively when his mother needed gentle hugs rather than boisterous play. These family dynamics played out against the backdrop of a nation watching and waiting for updates. The palace communications team faced the unprecedented challenge of managing public interest in two senior royals' health simultaneously. Every statement was carefully crafted to provide enough information to satisfy public concern while protecting the family's privacy. The joint hospital visit finally took place in early May, carefully timed to coincide with a period when both Charles and Catherine were feeling strong enough to handle the emotional demands of meeting other cancer patients. The visit to the Royal Marsden Hospital in London became a masterpiece of royal engagement, focused entirely on the patients rather than the royals themselves. Watching Charles and Catherine move through the cancer ward together was deeply moving for everyone present. Here were two of the most recognizable faces in the world, both bearing the physical marks of their own cancer treatments, taking time to listen to stories, offer encouragement, and share their own experiences with fellow patients. One patient, Maria Rodriguez, a mother of two who had been battling breast cancer for 8 months, later described her conversation with Catherine. She didn't talk to me like I was a patient to be pitied. She talked to me like a fellow warrior. When I mentioned how hard it was to explain my illness to my young children, her eyes filled with tears. She understood exactly what I was going through, because she was living it too. The visit generated headlines around the world, but more importantly, it generated hope. Cancer patients everywhere saw that if royalty could face this disease with dignity and courage, so could they. The images of Charles and Catherine, both visibly affected by their treatments but radiant with determination, became symbols of resilience that transcended social class and nationality. Behind the scenes, the visit had an equally profound impact on the royals themselves. Catherine later told William that seeing other patients fighting similar battles had given her perspective on her own journey. "I realized that my platform gives me an opportunity to help others in ways I never imagined," she said. "This experience, as difficult as it is, might be preparing me for a different kind of service." King Charles had a similar revelation. The man who had spent decades advocating for environmental causes and architectural preservation suddenly found himself with a new passion: cancer research and patient support. He began using his influence to connect researchers, encourage funding, and highlight innovative treatment approaches that could benefit patients across the Commonwealth. The summer months brought gradual improvement for both royals, but also new challenges. As their treatments progressed and their prognosis became more optimistic, the pressure to return to public duties intensified. Well-meaning officials and eager publics wanted to see them back in action, but their medical teams urged caution. Catherine struggled particularly with the timeline of her return. Months of treatment had changed her physically and emotionally. The woman who had once approached royal duties with boundless enthusiasm now found herself questioning what really mattered. Did the world really need another ribbon-cutting ceremony? Or could her time be better spent advocating for causes that touched her heart more deeply? These internal battles were fought away from public view, but they were real and significant. Both Charles and Catherine were discovering that surviving cancer wasn't just about beating the disease. It was about rebuilding themselves as people and as public figures. The experience had changed them fundamentally, and they needed time to understand what that meant for their future service. The support they received from unlikely sources during this period was remarkable. Former patients reached out to share their own stories and coping strategies. Medical professionals from around the world offered encouragement and expertise. Even critics of the monarchy found themselves moved by the very human struggle they witnessed. As autumn approached, both royals were making steady progress in their recovery, but they had also learned valuable lessons about patience, humility, and the importance of putting health first. The stage was being set for their eventual return to public life. but it would be a return on their own terms, informed by their shared journey through the valley of illness and into the light of renewed purpose. The bond forged between Charles and Catherine during these dark months would prove to be one of the most significant developments in modern royal history. They had entered this experience as king and daughter-in-law, but they emerged as true partners in service, united by their shared understanding of human frailty and the preciousness of every healthy day. September 2024 brought the first real signs of hope. King Charles's doctors reported excellent progress in his treatment, with scans showing significant improvement in his condition. Catherine's medical team was equally optimistic, indicating that her chemotherapy was working better than expected. But both royals had learned that recovery from cancer involved more than just medical progress. It required rebuilding physical strength, emotional resilience, and public confidence. The decision about when and how to return to public duties became a delicate dance between medical advice, constitutional necessity, and personal readiness. Charles, as the reigning monarch, faced unique pressures. His continued absence from major state functions raised questions about the monarchy's stability, despite the excellent work being done by Queen Camilla and other senior royals in his absence. Catherine's situation was different but equally complex. As the future queen and mother to the future king, her return needed to be managed carefully. The public had been invested in her journey from the beginning, and her reappearance would be scrutinized for signs of her recovery and her readiness to resume the demanding role of senior royal. The first test came in late September, when Charles decided to attend the opening of Parliament, one of his most important constitutional duties. The decision wasn't made lightly. His medical team had cleared him for limited public appearances, but the pageantry and physical demands of the state opening represented a significant milestone in his recovery. Watching Charles enter the House of Lords that October morning was an emotional moment for everyone present. The king, visibly thinner but radiantly determined, carried himself with a dignity that spoke of hard-won victories over fear and uncertainty. Queen Camilla, walking beside him, could barely contain her pride and relief. The assembled peers and members of Parliament rose in unprecedented unison, their applause lasting far longer than protocol typically allowed. Charles's speech that day was particularly meaningful. While he delivered the traditional outline of government policy, those who knew him well could hear subtle differences in his tone and emphasis. There was a new urgency in his words about healthcare funding, a deeper compassion in his references to those facing difficult times, and an unmistakable gratitude for the privilege of service. Catherine's first public appearance came 2 weeks later at a children's hospital in London. She had specifically chosen this engagement because it combined her passion for children's welfare with her newfound understanding of medical challenges.
The princess arrived looking radiant, her famous hair slightly shorter from treatment, but her smile as warm as ever.
The children at the hospital had no idea they were meeting someone who had recently completed her own medical journey, but the staff certainly did.
Nurses and doctors found themselves unusually emotional as they watched Catherine interact with young patients. Her questions were more insightful, her comfort with medical environments more natural, and her empathy more profound than it had been before her illness. One young patient, 7-year-old Emma Thompson, who was battling leukemia, later told her mother, "The Princess Lady understands why I'm tired sometimes. She has kind eyes, like the doctors who help me feel better." That simple observation captured something important about Catherine's transformation. Her experience had deepened her ability to connect with others facing medical challenges. The public reaction to both royals' return was overwhelmingly positive, but it also revealed how much the British people had been affected by their journey. Crowds gathered wherever they appeared, not just to see royalty, but to celebrate the triumph of 2 people they had come to see as symbols of courage and hope. Behind the scenes, both Charles and Catherine were working with reduced schedules, carefully managed by teams who understood that their health remained the top priority. Gone were the days of back-to-back engagements and international tours scheduled months in advance. Instead, they embraced a new approach that prioritized quality over quantity, choosing engagements that aligned with their renewed sense of purpose. This more intentional approach to royal duties actually enhanced their effectiveness. Charles's appearances, now limited but carefully chosen, carried more weight and generated more meaningful coverage. When he spoke about cancer research funding at a major charity gala in November, his words carried the authority of personal experience. The millions of pounds raised that evening broke all previous records for the event. Catherine's return followed a similar pattern. Her first major speech, delivered at a cancer awareness conference in December, was watched by millions worldwide. Speaking without notes, she shared insights that could only come from someone who had walked the difficult path of diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. Her message that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, became a rallying cry for patients and families across the globe. The collaboration between Charles and Catherine also reached new heights during their recovery period. Their shared experience had created a partnership that went beyond the traditional relationship between a monarch and the wife of his heir. They began working together on initiatives that combined their individual passions with their collective understanding of health challenges. Their joint launch of the Crown Courage initiative in January 2025 marked exactly 1 year since their cancer journeys began. The program, designed to support cancer patients and their families across the Commonwealth, represented the most significant royal health initiative in decades. It combined research funding, patient support, and public awareness in ways that leveraged both the traditional influence of the monarchy and their personal credibility as cancer survivors. The program's centerpiece was a network of support centers that would provide practical and emotional assistance to cancer patients and their families. Charles contributed his decades of experience in sustainable architecture to ensure the centers were healing environments. Catherine brought her understanding of family dynamics to create programs specifically designed to help children cope when a parent faces cancer. By the spring of 2025, both royals were operating at nearly full capacity, but they remained forever changed by their experience. Charles had discovered a new dimension to kingship, the power of vulnerability and shared struggle. His monarchy, which had begun with uncertainty about his age and readiness, now carried the weight of lived experience that resonated with subjects facing their own challenges. Catherine had evolved from a popular princess into a trusted advocate for health and healing. Her patronages, once focused on early childhood development and mental health, now included several cancer-related charities. But more importantly, her approach to all her work carried the depth that comes from confronting mortality and choosing hope. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had also been transformed by watching their mother fight cancer with grace and determination. Teachers reported that they showed unusual maturity and compassion for their ages. George, in particular, had developed a sophisticated understanding of service that seemed to come from watching his mother find strength in helping others even while battling her own illness. The ripple effects of their journey extended throughout the royal family. Prince William had emerged as a more confident leader, having managed family crisis while supporting both his wife and his father through their treatments. Queen Camilla had proven herself as a steady presence capable of carrying significant constitutional responsibilities. The entire institution had demonstrated resilience and adaptability in ways that strengthened rather than weakened public confidence. International reaction to their recovery and return was equally significant. World leaders who had sent cautious get-well messages during their illnesses now spoke openly about the inspiration they had drawn from the royals' courage. The British monarchy's soft power had been enhanced rather than diminished by their very public health struggles. Cancer organizations worldwide reported that the Catherine and Charles effect had led to increased screening rates, earlier detection of cancers, and reduced stigma around cancer diagnosis. Their openness about their struggles had quite literally saved lives by encouraging others to seek medical attention for concerning symptoms. As 22 progressed, both royals settled into their new reality as cancer survivors, carrying the responsibilities of the crown. Their calendars were full again, but different. Every engagement was chosen with intentionality. Every speech carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. Every public appearance reminded people that strength comes not from avoiding life's challenges, but from facing them with dignity and hope. The transformation was perhaps most visible during the traditional Christmas broadcast. King Charles, speaking from Windsor Castle with Catherine and the rest of the royal family present, reflected on a year that had brought darkness but ultimately led to greater light. His words about resilience, community, and the preciousness of health resonated with millions who had followed their journey. Catherine, standing beside William as Charles spoke, represented something new in royal history. A future queen who had faced down mortality and emerged with deeper wisdom about service and sacrifice. Her presence in that moment symbolized not just personal triumph, but institutional renewal. The final scene of their remarkable year came during the New Year's Eve celebration at Windsor Castle. As midnight approached, Charles and Catherine found themselves on a balcony overlooking the gardens where she had filmed her cancer announcement nearly a year earlier. The spring flowers she had been surrounded by then were now dormant, waiting for another season of renewal. "We made it," Catherine said quietly, her words carrying the weight of a year that had tested everything they thought they knew about strength, service, and survival. Charles nodded, his eyes bright with tears of gratitude. "We did more than make it," he replied. "We discovered what it really means to wear the crown, not as a symbol of power, but as a commitment to serve others, especially in their darkest moments." As fireworks lit up the sky above Windsor Castle, marking the beginning of 2026, both royals understood that their cancer journey had ended, but their service as survivors had just begun. They had returned to their roles forever changed, carrying within them a deeper understanding of human frailty and divine grace that would inform every day of their renewed service to the crown and to the people who looked to them for hope. The world watched those fireworks too, celebrating not just the arrival of a new year, but the triumph of two remarkable individuals who had faced their greatest fears and emerged with greater capacity to serve, to heal, and to inspire. Their story had become more than a tale of royal resilience. It was a testament to the power of hope, the importance of vulnerability, and the truth that sometimes our greatest struggles prepare us for our most important service.